If we order a pizza and they order a beer and I order a soda and they get upset that I ordered a soda, I don't want to hear it. Like, I'm done having pizza with that guy. He was 21 at the time. He went out drinking, got too drunk to drive home, walked home, and got hit by a drunk driver on his way home, and died on scene. That was kind of rough because he was doing the right thing, and still, the worst thing happened. This can't be a phone call, and the cops can't show up at her door. So I had to drive to my mother's house, knock on her door, watch her open the door, watch her be so happy to see me as a surprise.
Yeah.
And then I had to tell her that her son had been killed. Sorry.
Don't be sorry. I'm so sorry.
It was, without question, the hardest moment of my life. Okay. Everything is based in the squat. Learning how to squat properly, learning how to take power off the ground generated from your hips first and drive your body up from there. And I'm going to give you a dirty little secret in fitness. Once you can squat, you can do anything.
Hey, sober people and sober adjacent people. Welcome to I Have 12 Questions. I'm Amanda Patton, your host, a leading expert on nothing. However, I am in recovery and I love it so much so that I launched this podcast where we get to talk to people who are trudging the road to happy freaking destiny across all the different ways that people get there. So while this is definitely through the lens of recovery and sobriety, these stories and the themes that we'll be covering are universally human. So love, loss, grief, excitement, parenting, outside issues, purpose, God stuff, whatever. In the words of the great Ted Lasso by way of Walt Whitman, I want to be curious, not judgmental. So like I said, we'll be talking to people in recovery. We're going to be talking to experts and practitioners who help those people along their path in recovery. And we're just really excited to hear people tell their stories and to be inspired by them and to create a community of support for everybody in recovery and people who know and love people who struggle with addiction issues and whatnot. So anyways, we're so glad you're here and thanks for listening. Hey listeners, just a quick disclaimer before we get into the interview. These episodes may contain adult language and subject matter that's not appropriate for all audiences. Also, we are not doctors or psychiatrists, so what we share on these episodes is certainly not to be considered medical or psychological advice, just our own personal experiences, which we hope will be helpful to others on a similar quest. So that's it, and thanks for listening. All right. Hey, sober family and our entire listener community. So today we're talking to Tony Thomas, who owns Kilter Fitness, and he does a lot of other really brainy, cool things regarding fitness and kind of how it touches all areas of our lives. And he's sober adjacent, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit as we get into the interview, what that even means. But you guys know on this show that we always love getting perspectives outside of our little sober silos. So we met on a plane heading back from Amsterdam to Austin, and we talked for a really long time to the point where our neighbors were probably pretty annoyed. And his passion for fitness and teaching others how to take care of their bodies was just fascinating to me. And as it turns out, he's got a story to share also about how alcohol impacted his life. And so you can find him on Instagram at Kilter_Fitness. He's also connected to the UT system, certifying folks and doing all kinds of innovative things in the fitness world. And check him out for a lot of great tips. He's got videos where it's just these quick tips that are actually very helpful. So, Tony, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. Really? Well, I know you've been having kind of a rough last week or two. So I'm going to start with an icebreaker. Hopefully we can lighten things up a little bit. But if you were a professional wrestler, what would like kind of your character be, character name, walk-up song? Like what's your persona?
Oh, as a professional wrestler, God, I think if I was going to be a professional wrestler, I'd be one of the bad guys, right? Like one of the, like one of those guys that you love to hate. That would be way more fun than just trying to be like the good guy, because like there's too many expectations of that. I think if you're going to play a character in a situation like that, like being the bad guy that everyone kind of hates and you're kind of proud that everyone hates you, I
Yeah.
think that would be kind of more fun. That being said, I think my walkout song would be, somehow we'd have to remix Marilyn Manson's Beautiful People, if for nothing else, because the line that says, "It's not your fault that you're always wrong, the weak ones are there to justify the strong," would be amazing as a walkout song for a bad guy in the wrestling world.
I love that. I love that. And it's like, knowing, I don't know you very well, but knowing what I know of you, you're certainly not a villain. And so it would be fun and cool to like get to be just a total asshole, and just
Yeah.
do that and embrace it. And then I've got to, we're going to have to mix that music together and figure that out. I love that.
No, if it's about playing a character who is, I hope, wildly opposite from who I actually am, would be more fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard actors and stuff talk about that in interviews, how they love playing a villain because, there's always a part of us that wants to act like that sometimes, but we know not to. So right. It's probably fun to get to play that. So
yeah, and in that world, they're looking for characters like that. So I think it'd be a really good time.
Well, how does your story tie to alcohol? And like, I know a lot of it now because we've had several conversations, but like our listeners don't. And I know that's a really loaded question. There's a lot there, but just give us, if you could give us the kind of Cliff Notes version or Spark Notes or whatever the kids are calling it these days. How does it happen?
So I guess I guess I'll give you the kind of the quick version of it. I grew up, my parents got divorced when I was fairly young. I think I was in the 5th or 6th grade when they got divorced. My brother and I, it was me and my brother and my father. We lived with my father, which was really rare, given a variety of circumstances, but rare at all in the 80s that a man would get his children. But so it was me, my father, and my brother growing up, and we were very, very close. And it's not that my mom wasn't around, but we didn't live with her. And nothing negative about my mom. She's a wonderful person. But just kind of not part of the story in this way. But so my brother was like 2.5 years older than me. And we finished high school. I was 19 years old. And my brother went out drinking one night. He was 21 at the time. He went out drinking, got too drunk to drive home, walked home, and got hit by a drunk driver on his way home and died on scene. And that was kind of rough because, he was doing the right thing and still the worst thing happened. Wow. My father, who was an alcoholic, his entire life from what I can tell. But, it was really interesting because he talked to us about alcohol a lot and how to use alcohol responsibly, in many ways. And maybe that's just from being a high functioning alcoholic, but, he did that. And then, so my brother kind of did the right thing, but then my father just couldn't handle it. And so my brother got killed in July, and my father just sat down. It took him a couple of months, but he drank himself to death after that. We don't have even a word for what it is to lose a child and to watch him, not be able to handle it, and to watch what my mother went through. And she has found ways to cope, but to watch him intentionally drink himself to death was pretty tough at 19 years old. This all happened when I was very, very young. So yeah. It was time to grow up fast.
I'm sorry that happened. That is just, and knowing I've been married to an alcoholic and I have been an alcoholic in active in my addiction. So I've been on both sides and it sucks on both sides, but yeah. to probably want to help your dad, knowing that he was going to self-destruct, and there's nothing you can do when somebody's in their active addiction. You cannot help, like someone has to, and that has got to be just devastating. I'm really sorry that happened. And I'm going to rearrange the order of my questions real quick because
okay.
One of the questions is, when was the hardest time in your life and how did or do you cope? And I don't know if that was the hardest time in your life. It's probably, but maybe not. And so like, how do you cope? Because you're watching all that, you're 19. I don't know what kind of emotional awareness you had or tools, coping mechanisms, all that kind of stuff. So like, how did you not just shut down the way your dad did, or the way other people did? What did you do?
It was real difficult, to be honest with you. And I can tell you this: what's the hardest thing I've ever done? The hardest thing I've ever done was when I was 19 years old. It was Sunday morning when the cops showed up at my door to tell me that my brother had been killed, and they had already been to my father's house to tell him. So I had to go over there and deal with that. He was, as you might imagine, a full-fledged basket case. And then they hadn't told my mother. And I had to make a decision that, well, do you want us to call her? And in that moment, I had to grow up right then.
Yeah.
Because in that moment, I was like, this can't be a phone call. And the cops can't show up at her door. So I had to drive to my mother's house, knock on her door, watch her open the door, watch her be so happy to see me as a surprise.
Yeah.
And then I had to tell her that her son had been killed. Sorry.
Don't be sorry. I'm so sorry.
It was, without question, the hardest moment of my life.
Yeah.
At the time, by the time I was 18 years old, I had talked myself into, I was managing $1 million a year restaurant, which don't let an 18-year-old do that, but I was doing that. And I had all these responsibilities. And, when you manage a restaurant when you're 18 years old, all your employees are 16 and 17 years old.
Right.
And so I kind of had this responsibility anyway. At the time, I wasn't drinking very much. I wasn't really doing any drugs or anything. I was just I was working a lot. And I was helping like these kids grow up, these suburban kids who just, they're just like the suburban high school kids that don't have responsibility. I was kind of helping them grow up. And I just kind of sunk myself into that. I sunk myself into this moment of, I always said, look, this happened. I lost my brother and I lost my father in very quick succession. And it is horrible. And even at that moment, I was like, okay, I can either let this destroy me, or I can use it to become a stronger person.
Yeah. And
I chose the latter. I chose to just, okay, this sucks, but it makes you stronger. It makes you better. And that's the decision that I took. And it's not that I haven't had issues with substance use. It's not that it's, again, I even claim I'm not 100% sober now, but and there's times I've used alcohol and other substances more than I should have, for sure. But I didn't lean into it because it hurts so bad to watch alcohol take away the two people who are most important to me in my life, to watch them go in very quick succession.
But
it was been very easy to not drink for a while.
So, but with sinking yourself into work and that kind of addiction of busyness that a lot of us get into, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, if it saves you from self-destructing, like, yes, it's okay for a while. But like, did you grieve also? Were you allowing yourself also to just break down and cry and be sad and all the stuff you need to do? Or were you just like, you know what, I'm going to work. I'm just going to work and I'll deal with these things later?
I didn't, and I should have. What I should have done is admit that I needed therapy.
Yeah.
Stop being mean to my girlfriend. This poor woman who was amazing, and tried to stand by me through this as much as she possibly could. We are still friends. We got back together sometime after that. We were together for like 12 years. We're not together anymore, but when we're still friends, but what she went through, her ability to try to stand by me when I was just an absolute like work, and just like I was just mad all the time, as you might imagine. And I try not to be abusive to her. I was never like physically abusive, but I was certainly mean to her more than I should have been, because we're all 19 years old. We're all trying to grow up. We don't know who we are yet, right?
Yeah.
And So, I never really gave myself a chance to grieve as much as I should have. I always talk about how I became a 7-Eleven grief counselor there for a while. Is in the town that I grew up in, like everybody knew that it was me and my dad and my brother, and I still lived in that little town. And it wasn't little, but and I would run into people. I'd be at a 7-Eleven, and some guy would come into 7-Eleven to get a pack of smokes and sees me. He's like, "Hey, how you doing, man?" "I'm okay. How are you?" Blah, blah, blah. And he's like, "Hey," and the natural progression is, "Hey, how's your brother?" Everyone asked that question because they
Of
knew how
course.
close we were.
Yeah.
And then I had to say, "Oh, now I can't lie to him, so I got to tell him that he'd been killed." And then these poor people, their immediate next question, obviously, is, "Oh my God, how's your father?" And now this poor person who just like wanted to get a soda and a pack of cigarettes gets punched in the gut, right? And then just as soon as they think everything's fine, they get punched in the gut again. And now I'm standing there in 7-Eleven. Now we're outside, we're smoking a cigarette, and I became grief counselor to dozens of people for years after it. And that was the closest I got to therapy in that situation, but it was quite cathartic. I got to grieve with dozens of people in the grocery store, at the convenience store, just randomly because of that. And it was oddly helpful,
Yeah.
although I will tell you that go to therapy. Like, don't just rely on strangers in the convenience store for therapy. But
I love that. I love hearing that. Just because, a lot of people, because I've always said that too. And I was like, yeah, no thanks. I'm not going to sit there and tell everybody all my stuff. But also, a lot of people are like, I can't afford therapy or blah, 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 whatever. And it's like, there are support groups. There are support groups for everything in the world, in the communities. If they're free, sometimes they're toxic as hell. Sometimes they're super healthy. But just ask for help, whatever that looks like. So if you can't afford a $200 an hour therapist, like, my God, talk to somebody, go to I don't know, there's all kinds of community centers, and people know this, but a lot of times we say, I can't afford therapy, meaning also, I don't want to do therapy. I don't have time. Right. And it's like, so I love the fact that you kind of were able to talk to people, but also feeling like you have this burden, like just sharing about your life and your experiences, you feel like you're burdening people, which sucks, right? But that's your truth. That's what was happening. And I think at 19 too, and Brene Brown always talks about stop working your shit out on other people. And that's what we do, right? Whoever's around, my shit's going to come out sideways on you because I haven't dealt with this other thing. So your girlfriend, your former girlfriend, or in my case, my daughter, my family, but it sucks because we really do kind of beat up on the people we love the most. And in my experience, I beat up on myself. However I treat myself generally is how I'm treating other people. And so sometimes I'm really mean to myself, and there's a lot of inner critic stuff going on. And so that judgment that I put on myself, it's like, of course, I'm going to project that onto the world. And as my relationship with myself has improved, my relationship with others, shockingly, has also improved. So
it's amazing how it's all tied together, and we like to pretend that it's not. And we know we've read the books, we've listened to the experts, and we know it's all tied together. But it's so easy to try to compartmentalize, and it doesn't work. You compartmentalize, eventually it's going to blow up in your face, and we just need to admit that to ourselves so that we can actually function in society in a healthy way.
Well, so everyone has their own, I say this all the time, but the longer I'm alive, the more I realize that everything's a spectrum. Like every experience, like sexuality and gender and just all the things, it's like everything is just this spectrum. And I was always taught to think, right or wrong, good or bad, black or white, like pick a side type of deal. So even in fitness, there's a lot of dogma. There's a lot of blah, 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 whatever. There's a lot of snake oil. So what's your brand of fitness? Like everyone has their own version of what fitness means to them. What is your brand of being fit? Like what does that look like?
That's an excellent question, and you led into it really well. Is I'm very opposed to all the dogma in fitness. The only absolutes in fitness and in every other aspect of of life is that there are no absolutes. And anytime you tell me this is absolutely the thing to do, like, well, you're wrong. Like, I know you're wrong, because there's it's not black and white. Everything is gray. For me, fitness is, I take, let me back up a little bit. I take my inspiration from all facets of fitness, from Pilates, from yoga, from football strength training, from the physical therapists, from CrossFit, from the bodybuilders, just really from, the athletic prep trainers. I take my inspiration from everywhere. And I really believe in the personal side of personal training. I really believe in treating every person who comes to me as a unique individual, analyzing their body. How does it work? How does it really work? How do they want it to work? And what are the means that I can use to get from where they are to where they want to be? And then how can I maintain that? And I want to maintain that for the rest of their lives. I believe in, I don't like to make changes that aren't sustainable. I'm never going to throw someone into a nutritional program or an exercise program that's we're going to make these changes in 6 weeks. No. If you need to get done in 6 weeks, it's not going to get done.
Yeah.
I'm here. I want to make changes that are sustainable. I want to build a body that is sustainable and functional for many, many decades. And so I'm very methodical and slow with what I do. Not necessarily slow, but I'm very methodical with what we do. We don't do a lot of max training. We don't do a lot of super high intensity stuff. I don't care how much you bench. I'm probably never going to find out how much you can squat. We don't max out at my gym for the most part, very rarely, but it's about I don't care how much you can lift. I care about lifting the appropriate amount to make you stronger.
Right.
So I'm somewhere. If you walk into my gym and you look around, it's a lot of one-on-one, about half one-on-one and then half small group stuff. If you were to casually walk into my gym, you would go, oh, looks like a CrossFit gym. And it does look like a CrossFit gym. Looks like a clean CrossFit gym, but it looks like a CrossFit gym. But the clock isn't on. We're never saying do this for time. We're never saying do this as fast as you can, as many as you can in 20 minutes. We're never saying as heavy as you possibly can. We don't do that. How much someone lifts is a daily conversation between me and them. Everyone is chemically a different person every single day, given a variety of things that are going on in their lives. And so we talk about how we're chemically different every day, and maybe we need to lift a different amount. On the days that you're I had a rough weekend, it's Monday morning, I was super active, did a bunch of running, did a bunch of hiking or whatever it was. Okay, let's do everything really slow, lighter weights, get the movements in and recover. You come in Monday morning and say, man, I didn't do much all weekend, but I got a lot of rest. I'm ready to tear after it. Okay, good. We're going to do that same workout, heavier, faster, with more intensity, if that's appropriate for you in that situation.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of my brand. My brand is a combination of every brand. I've read so many fitness books and taken inspiration from every single one of them. And so that's kind of what I do in a nutshell, without actually answering your question, probably.
No, you totally did. But because it sounds like you take a holistic approach to the whole person instead of let's just talk about what you're doing in the gym. No, we're going to talk about nutrition and sleep and hydration and mental health and all these other things. But also one of my favorite, I've been an avid CrossFitter for a long time, and I've had to lay off of it the last couple of years because of, my body's getting older. My knee doesn't like things. I got used to being able to strong arm an amount of weight, and then my technique started to break down. And so what did I do? I continued to push and lift what I did not have the technique to justify, and I kept hurting myself, but my ego would not allow me to stop and deal with that. So anyways, that's my own stuff, but what I'm saying is
no, and that's actually very normal stuff. And so much of what I do is I back people off of that. So I tell people to take weights off more than I tell people to put weights on.
See, but I want, and this is one of my questions. One of them, it's kind of twofold, how much of exercise is really about psychology, right? And like why and how, right? So that's a part of it. But also a lot of people get sober, and the people in my community circles, and go hog wild with fitness stuff, myself included. And
Right.
in true addict fashion, maybe we overdo it at first because I was used to chaos, intensity, big bursts of chemical releases, and then these peaks and valleys, right? So, and then suffering, right? Suffering was a huge part of my life. It was almost like I didn't feel like I was really alive unless I was suffering. So I looked to fitness to let out some angst, to pay penance. It was this weird relationship that I had with it, but I needed to be really busy. I needed to go to a lot of AA meetings. I needed to be in the gym, or I needed to be asleep or working. Those were the four things that I sort of was allowed to do.
Right.
But I went crazy and I did it too much and could have hurt myself. Actually, probably did hurt myself, but whatever. So all of that to say, psychology and exercise, how much of that is tied in. And then how do you coach people like me who are still on that, you're trying to channel all of this energy into something healthy and turning it into an unhealthy thing?
Okay.
You do that.
That's a huge can of worms, and let's talk about that from a variety of perspectives. Let's talk about initially when we deal with people. Let's talk about sobriety first. When we've got people who are in detox, who are in early stages of recovery, we tend to use we use fitness to replace bad habits with good habits.
Yep.
All right. And the fact of the matter is, when we get into the gym, a lot of what we do releases the dopamine that alcohol and cocaine release, right? Mm-hmm. So that's good because we're getting in a much healthier way, okay? But it has to remain a healthier way.
Right.
So replacing bad habits with good habits is great. Now, to be fair, we have to have this conversation, and this is real important, is that working out is therapeutic but is not therapy. But if we're using our exercise as therapy, we're not solving the problem. Now, we've replaced alcohol and drugs with running and lifting, and that's good. And it gives us the dopamine, it gives us the outlet, it gives us that burst of energy, that burst of intensity, that moment of chaos that we love, right? We love that moment of chaos.
Yeah.
It gives us that, but it doesn't solve the problem. Now, therapeutic, not therapy, which is great.
Love that.
So we have to go back and say, okay, are you in therapy? What are you doing to really deal with the problems? Are you working with a therapist? Are you in a 12-step? Are you, what exactly are you doing? Whatever works for you is fine, but we have to deal with it from that perspective of let's replace the bad stuff with good stuff, with better stuff. And we're going to keep that good stuff. We're going to keep the exercise, but we're going to start using it as a supplement to therapy, not as therapy itself. Until we do that, all we're going to do is go hog wild in the gym. And next thing you know, we're going to take these branched chain amino acids, and I'm going to take this thing. And and I've watched people who went from heroin to steroids real fast, right? Because if some is good, more must be better.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're still using a needle. You need to not use needles, that's doctors put needles in you, not you. But so we try to find a way to bridge that gap and create some moderation. So I do treat people as a whole person, and we're trying to find that moderation. And let me be very clear. I say bad things about CrossFit all the time, only because I like so much of what CrossFit does that the few things they do wrong, in my opinion, make me so mad because so much of what they do is great. CrossFit leads in, they lean into that intensity, and they're not solving your problems. They're just giving you a shift into that. Like I said, I back people off a lot.
Yeah.
And I talk to them. Okay, I need to go hard today. Okay, tell me why. Tell me why you think you really need to drive into this today. And maybe you do, but it can't be your sole source of stress relief.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, obviously this podcast is about recovery type stuff. So that's what I'm talking about. But also people do the same thing with after grief, when you lose something horrible happens, or maybe you're going through a divorce or like whatever, it's like a replacement. And like you're saying, there's nothing wrong with it. And, my sponsor keeps using this word balance. I keep telling her I've never heard of it. What? I don't get it. That's not how I do it. But I understand now I have to have that discipline too. But I need coaches. I need people like you. I need mentors. I need people to remind me, hey man, why are you in such a hurry? What's going on? And then looking underneath what is happening. And then one of my, look, back in the day, CrossFit was certainly Fight Club style. We don't care if you break an ankle or throw out your back, like just get through the WOD. And it's evolved over time. And a lot of boxes are a lot healthier and more balanced in their, approach. But one of my favorite coaches said something about like, today we're working out with the body that you have today, which is what you were just talking about, right? Just because you lifted XYZ last week and did this WOD in this amount of time, that has nothing to do with right now. We're going to talk about where are you emotionally, where are you physically, how's your sleep, how's your nutrition today, hydration, how does your shoulder feel? And then you just do that. And in my mind, I was like, no, but that's dialing it in. Like you're being weak, like you're being a baby, like suck it up, figure it out, because that's how we kind of grew up.
Absolutely.
And so
absolutely. We were raised by boomers who were like, you do the work, right?
Do it, no matter what. So I think
we are chemically different every day.
Yeah. People have to trust you, someone like you, not just on a physical fitness trainer person level, but like a human being. Like, I know you, I understand you. I know all the things that are going on, a lot of things are going, because there are two people that know all my business besides my therapist, which is my trainer and my hair person.
Mm-hmm.
So do people just go nuts telling you every single thing about their life?
Oh my God. I know everybody's everything, everything. And I got to tell you, I love the most gratifying part of what I do for a living is the relationships that I build.
Yeah.
And I say that because I build trust, I build respect with every client I have. I give them a safe space to share what's going on in a completely judgment-free place. That you can bring all your stuff to me and I'm going to go, okay, well, that happened. Let's move on. How can we make better decisions? How can we deal with what's happened? People who, and your hairstylist, you see your hairstylist like what, once a month, once every 6 weeks, maybe that. I see people 3, 4, 5 times a week.
I can't imagine.
There's nothing I don't know. And I love that. And I keep that stuff in confidence, obviously, but I have these conversations. And my people stay with me for years and years. I measure my clients in years, not months and weeks.
Right.
I've got clients who have been with me since 2008 who are still with me.
That's awesome.
And I'm very proud of that. But I know them. I know what they've been through. I know what they're going through. And I get them talking. First of all, I share all of my stuff.
Yeah.
When we first talked and you're like, how do you feel about, sharing that stuff? I'm like, I got no problem with it because I'm an open book. Yeah. I've been through a lot. I continue to go through a lot. And I feel like we feel like we go through things that are so, like, life is so lonely, right? Everything we do, we feel so alone. And if I can share with people that, you're not struggling. I mean, your struggle is unique, but it's not that much different from mine. And I'm going to stop hiding my struggles from everybody so that they can feel comfortable knowing that they are not alone. It just feels that way. And then they open up to me because I open up to them.
Yeah.
And then at that point, we can start dealing with, okay, so what's going on? You're limping. What's going on? Oh, it's nothing. No, maybe your back's not right today. Or, hey, you look a little stressed. Well, I was been working this thing, or me and my wife are having some problems, or whatever it is. They share that with me, and then we can dial their workouts in based on what's happening.
Right. It's like that mind-body connection. And that's why yoga and Pilates are so beautiful, because it is all connected. And I've cried a lot of times on my yoga mat and for inexplicable I'm just like, what the hell just happened? But it's like, oh yeah, I finally got still and quiet enough to let my mind and body come together instead of using exercise like medicine to mask, right? To cover, to avoid. Because for me, I could go into my CrossFit gym every day and for 1 hour, just check out, completely check out. I was in such pain and so focused on my movement that I couldn't think about anything. My anxiety, my intrusive thoughts didn't have control of me. I could just, but then I would leave there and guess what? All of it is, I have 15 minutes of a little endorphin rush. And then 15 minutes later, my old brain is back, my problems, my emotional regulation stuff,
Yeah, it's like we talk about that all the time, and there's some good and bad to that.
Yeah.
I always talk about when we come to the gym, let's set everything outside. Let's leave everything at the door. When you set your gym bag down, set down the rest of your life with it. And let's get into that. And when you can put your problems down, when you can put your work stress down, when you can put your family stress down for half an hour or an hour, that's great. Because then when you pick it back up, sometimes it doesn't feel as heavy. And sometimes we leave some of it sitting there. Yeah. And that's great. Sometimes like, you know what? I don't need to pick that back up today. I can pick that up next week sometime.
Right.
And so that's good. But like everything else, if we're using it as our sole source of therapy, then we just end up picking everything back up. And we probably pick something else up off the shelf while we were there. Right. And it gets heavier. So we have to deal with it from both sides. I always talk about yoga as an opportunity to sit quietly with your shortcomings for an hour. Right. Right. And that's what it is. And it gives you an opportunity. First of all, you were forced to face it. You're forced to face, like, why can't I get into this position? And like it or not, you got to sit there and think about all your bad decisions that led up to you not being able to get into pigeon. Right? And I say it as a joke, but I also really mean it because we're forced to deal with ourselves because there's no one on that mat with you.
Yeah.
And that's what's so beautiful about it is that I can always like make adjustments in the gym, but man, on that mat, there's nothing but reality.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of my favorite things, and this is why I think you and I just started connecting, and it's really safe to talk to people on planes for me anyways, because I'm like, I'm never going to see this person again. So I don't give a shit. I'll just talk about whatever. But then like, I was like, oh, you live in Austin? I was like, oh, do you want to be on my podcast? So I'm like, it's weird because a lot of times when you're talking to people you're never going to see again, there is this freedom of like, okay, so, but you were telling me all this stuff and I'm like, what? All connecting the dots and the parallels and like how everything is tied together. But for me, what CrossFit represented was I would walk in and I would see the watt on the board and I would be like, that's impossible. It's 110 degrees in here. There's no air conditioning. I'm exhausted from work and I have to do this series of movements and I'm never going to be able to get through this. And then I would, one rep at a time. And then so that grit, that pushing through, that love and belief in myself and that willingness to just fucking do it, but it fed that competitive, like overdoing it side of me too. And so I had to learn how to temper that. And then as my body ages, again, my ego was like, sorry, what? No, I'm still 25. I have no idea what you're talking about. You're not 47. But, my body is like, listen. And so having coaches who are honest and who are like, just because you don't load your bar down doesn't mean you're not having a good workout. And I don't know where I got that messaging from, right?
That's a very difficult balance. I always talk about this. Where are you going to err? Where's your error going to be? And this is not so much the case anymore, but in the early years of CrossFit, they didn't say this out loud, but their attitude was, we would rather risk hurting you than risk not working you out hard enough.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And that's the attitude. And there is some merit to that. And I'll say this, and I always talk about this, there's a difference between human beings and athletes.
Yeah.
With athletes, we can't run the risk of not working them out hard enough. Because if I don't work you out hard enough, we are not going to win and nothing else matters. Okay,
Yeah.
so if I hurt you, it's fine,
At all
because if I
costs.
didn't work you hard enough, you weren't going to win anyway. So we just don't win. Fine. Okay, so there's that attitude. Human beings, and having been a professional athlete, and now hopefully a human being, I've learned the difference between what it means to go to prepare for athletics and then to prepare for life. They're wildly different, although they look very, very similar. And the difference is finding a balance. Rather than erring on the side of hurting you, I will err on the side of not working you out hard enough. Because for me, 85% is fine.
Right.
85% today is fine, because it's way better than 0%, and
Right.
100% might hurt you. So
Right.
if I have to back you down to 85%, it's fine. It's fine. And it works because I don't want to risk 2 weeks worth of exercise. I'm sitting on an injury right now, and I'm now 2 weeks out from of no exercise because of it. I would rather, I don't want to miss 2 weeks of exercise just for these 10 minutes.
Right.
That we felt the need to go hard. So that's where someone like me comes in and finds that balance.
Right. And
that's my.
So, and this applies too to work or to all these other areas of life, right? Like I'm either working 80 hours a week or I'm just a shitty employee or a shitty business owner, right? It's the same thing of like, yes, but what does that do in the long term when you get sick or you have adrenal burnout and you can barely focus anymore, whatever happens, right? So it's like, don't look at the short term. Like you've got to have somebody help you put this. But one of the things that I was fascinated by so much of what you said, because I was like, from hacky sacks to just all these different things. And I don't know how much you can talk about like what you do at UT or who you're talking to. So I won't specifically say the organization that I'm referring to, but how are you working to influence the leaders you're teaching in the fitness space to get away from some of this mentality that we're talking about, this kind of like caveman, like at all costs, more into the longevity focused intellectual side of exercise, understanding, listening to your body, slowing down, backing off, the direct opposite. Because when you're talking about athletes, soldiers, people who extreme is the name of the game, right? How do you do that? I don't even understand like what you're
okay. So absolutely no secrets in my world. So I don't have a problem telling you what I do at UT. So I work under the extended campus umbrella at the University of Texas, and I teach through the Center for Professional Education and through extended campus custom training, where I teach a personal trainer's course through those two organizations, one for the general public and one for the Army, where I am training people to be high quality personal trainers. I teach through an organization called WITS out of Virginia. They manage my program, and we teach it it's taught at universities around the country, actually around the world. And I am the guy at the University of Texas who does that.
Okay.
And the whole goal is it came from looking at the personal training industry, where it has been too easy to become a personal trainer for too long, and that is a result that has created a world where too many, I don't want to say bad people, but poorly educated people or improperly educated people became personal trainers, and they are not good at what they do, and they hurt people, and because they were never taught properly. So I decided I could either complain about the problem or I could fix the problem. And I'm a personal trainer. Let's work hard and fix it. So I became an educator. And so I take students through a 6-week course where we're in the classroom going through the theory in the textbook, so like a regular classroom setting where we're doing that. And then we also spend 3 hours a week in the gym learning how to coach, learning how to look at the human body, learning how to use the equipment, learning how to coach, learning how to say, hey, this is what a squat should look like. That squat doesn't look like that. What can I do to make it look the way it's supposed to?
Right.
How do I get from where we are to where we want to go? So what I'm doing in the general public and in the Army now is creating, hopefully, this may be maybe my ego speaking here, but what I'm trying to do is create the next generation of trainers who look at the whole body, who take a holistic approach to fitness, avoiding the extremism. That the problem is Instagram loves the extreme, right? All the Instagram models, they love the extreme stuff. And that's great, but that doesn't work in the long term. I mean, what I want is I teach my students, and then I do mentoring after those 6 weeks, as long as they want me to make high quality trainers.
But you also mentioned earlier sustainability. It has to be sustainable. So that extreme that we're talking about, you can't do that forever, right? And so like and I think the fact that you're in the gym working with people, and like when you have somebody really break down, that your squat and your points of performance, as they call it in CrossFit and all this kind of stuff, it's like you just go in and it doesn't matter what shape anything is in. We're just going to go. We're going to lift and do whatever. And without any assessment of gait, or if you're overcompensating on one side, shoulder, knee injury, this, that, and the other. So what kind of stuff do you like say or do that is influencing or changing how people look at this? And also, I would assume that the general public training those trainers is different than training soldiers, because that's a high stakes, like that could be a life or death type of situation. And so the way you're going to train a soldier has to be different than regular people, right?
Yes and no. Yes, from the perspective of when they're preparing for deployment, they need to ramp things up. But when we think about the life of a soldier, let's even just say the 20 or 30 years that someone might be in the Army, that most of that isn't deployed. Most of that isn't prepared for deployment. Most of the guys who need to be at that extreme level are your special forces.
Right.
Your infantry even just needs to be in general shape. They don't need to be at that extreme level, because so much of what soldiers do isn't the combat. It's the movement around. And so it's actually a lot more similar than you might think, except when we move into the special forces, that's when we're starting to treat them more like athletes. So it is a little bit different, although the soldiers they need a little more, almost a little more coddling in a way, because they were through basic training, they were drilled in this attitude of do it. All right. Yeah. And I'm saying, let's back off just a little bit and learn to do it right so that we can do it.
Right. Yeah.
And so for me, what I teach everybody, one of the first things we do in the gym, whether you come to me as a client or the first day in the lab in class, is we watch people squat, and we learn about how watching someone squat can tell us everything about their body. I can watch you squat. Give me 8 squats and I can tell you virtually everything about your body.
That's crazy.
And then we're going to, there's certainly more things I can learn along the way, but right. In 30 seconds, I'll be able to identify how your basic structure is functioning, and then what I need to do to change that. I will talk about this as an example. As I have a newish client who came to me fairly recently, and she's like, "Hey, she's fit, she's strong, but her knees hurt all the time, her feet hurt all the time." And so she came in. I was like, "Let's do some squats." I'm okay. Here's why your knees hurt. Take your shoes off and watch your feet move. Okay, here's why your feet hurt. Here are 2 tools that you can use on your own, and in a week and a half, gone. Her foot pain is gone. Her knee pain is gone, because I taught her in one session how to move her body properly.
Right.
I taught her how to squat properly. And that is kind of the magic of what I do, and the magic of what I share as an educator is that we need to develop an eye for human movement and have the tools to coach. And so if I can make your knees stop hurting, now you can go for a run. Now you can lift heavy. Now you can do that stuff. But it just requires sometimes that we can fix it in an hour. Sometimes it takes 6 months. I don't know how long it takes, depending on the individual and how things are. She was very strong, very fit. She was using her muscles in the wrong order, taught her how to use them in the right order, problem solved. Now she's a full-time client of mine because she's like, oh, I don't want to think about it anymore. It's your job now, which is fine. That's how I make a living.
Yeah.
But it's, I'm teaching that. I'm teaching, hey, rather than let's just like throw them in the gym and see what happens. Your first session with me, you're pretty much just going to do a bunch of squats and learn how to fire your posterior kinetic chain properly. That's what we're going to do. And you're not going to be sweaty. And like the next day you might be sore, maybe not, but we're going to learn how your body works. And that patience in the initial setup for me lays the framework for everything. And then when you come in the gym and you look on the board and there's that impossible workout, you're going to trust me that you can get it done.
Right. At whatever capacity you're firing at that day.
At whatever level is appropriate for the day. Absolutely.
And I think too, I got my CrossFit trainer certifications just out of curiosity because I wanted to better understand the anatomy. I've been NASM certified and all that for a long time, and did train people at one point, but the CrossFit stuff, I wanted to better understand the mechanics and the technique and the orders of the Olympic lift and how to know if your posterior chain is firing properly and all these things. But in the workshops and all the things as you're getting certified, your job is to sit there and break down the points of performance and like point out the corrections, even like the tiniest angle of like where your foot is, where your toe is and your things and all that. And I was like, good Lord, no wonder this is so hard. No wonder it's an Olympic sport because there's a lot that goes into it. And it takes a lot of, you cannot take a shortcut. You cannot strong arm. You get to a point with a certain amount of weight where you've got to have the right technique. And that's where a lot of people hit the wall. So I love the fact that
you cannot muscle through your Olympic lifts. You can't do it.
Unless you want to get crushed by the bar, which people do.
I have tried every single way to muscle through the Olympic lifts. I guarantee you I've tried it all, and it doesn't work.
Well, I'm going to get back to like more personal stuff, and then we'll get back to, because I only have a couple more questions. We're kind of up on time, so I want to be, but how have your relationships changed since because it sounds like you went through some things in your life that were very difficult, whether just, with what happened with your family, maybe with your own experiences with, relationships or different things like that. And it's like, you mentioned on the plane that you went through some periods of time where you weren't handling things in a healthy way, maybe.
Oh, yeah.
How have your relationships changed since you kind of replaced some of those maladaptive coping skills with healthier things? And that, first and foremost, your relationship with yourself, but then also relationships with other people around you.
So my relationship with myself, let's start with that, because that's honestly the most important one.
Yeah.
Is when I was living and working in Chicago, I'd moved to Chicago for work. I was able to, because of the work I did, I could get off work and start drinking immediately for free at any of the bars in and around where I worked. And I found myself doing that because I was networking, right? And I was meeting people. And then I was like, oh, I've been drunk 4 days this week. That's probably not okay, right? And so I was just very honest with myself. I'm like, I need to not be doing that. I need to find a healthier way. So for me, it was like, okay, I can drink after I go to the gym, get off work, go to the gym, and then I can drink. And then I just kind of wouldn't drink so much after that.
Yeah, because you feel so good after a workout.
Yeah, why? I don't need to. And plus all the guys that I want to meet have already left. I already left the bar. So, but and so we go through all that, and then so I start kind of replacing bad habits with better habits, and that was really helpful for me. And mostly it was like being honest with myself. It was like, oh, I don't need to be drinking this much. And it's not that I never drank; it's that I had to kind of get control of it from that perspective. Mm-hmm. But it is really interesting in my life is as I've I basically can categorize them into 3 different categories of people. There are people who when I'm not drinking, like almost take it personally, because drinking and using drugs is real ritualistic and it's part of the community, and people like get upset when you deviate from those norms.
Yep.
And those people they've left my life.
Yeah.
The guys who, if we order a pizza and they order a beer and I order a soda and they get upset that I ordered a soda, I don't want to hear it. Like, I'm done having pizza with that guy.
Yeah.
And the groups of people that, like, everything, like all their stuff, all their social activities revolve around alcohol.
Yeah.
I kind of don't hang out with those guys anymore.
Yeah.
Then I have some people who, who do drink and whatnot. And when I say, hey, no, I'll just be honest with you. I snowboard a lot. So my snowboarding friends, they all live in Colorado. Get to Colorado, we finish snowboarding. They're smoking, they're drinking, and I'm like, no, I'm good. And that group of people and groups of people like them are like, oh, okay. And that's it. That's the end of the conversation.
Right.
They're like, well, we're going to go outside and smoke a bowl. I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to go do that. And they're like, okay, we'll be back in a minute. And that's it. And I love those people in my life because they have their thing and they don't mind that I do things my way.
Yes.
And I have people in my life who kind of gave it all up the way I do. The people in my life who are in a program and sober, or the people like me who are sober adjacent, who drink very rarely, and just those two of those categories, I've maintained those relationships. That first category are people that I don't maintain those relationships because they're for whatever reason unable to comprehend that life without alcohol can exist. So I just that's tough, but it is. I'm not going to have. I don't feel the need to answer those questions and defend myself. So I just don't.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because I think naturally, I remember in the very beginning, my sponsor, she goes, go through your phone. Anybody that you drink or use with, or that's a temptation, or that's an entryway back into that world, you need to just program them in your phone as DNA, do not answer. That way, if it's just a number, you might pick it up because you don't know who it is. But if you've reprogrammed it as DNA, you don't know who the person is, but you know that this is part of your old. And I was like, what? That's like 98% of my contacts. And she was like, yeah. But she goes, naturally, you don't have to break up with people. You don't have to tell them I can't be friends with you anymore because you do cocaine every weekend or whatever. It will just naturally evolve. Like, y'all won't have much to talk about anymore. You just, and you're going to start making new friends and different friends who are focused on other things. And I didn't believe her, but absolutely, that's how it happened. And I'm not judgmental of people who live that lifestyle, but I don't want them to be judgmental of my lifestyle either. And it's like, do what you need to do, but like, don't give me a hard time about being a stick in the mud or thinking I'm better than you now. I've heard all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, that's not
right.
Cool. That's not cool.
And so it's important for us to understand, and I talk about this not so much with alcohol, but certainly with alcohol and with food. Food and alcohol are very ritualistic in our society. Yeah. If you don't believe that, fraternities. The ritual of drinking in fraternities. Yeah. How many, and just within friends, how many friends have that shot ritual where they raise your shot, you bounce it off the table, and then you drink it, right? Those are the rituals of alcohol. And those rituals are very important. And when we deviate from those rituals, when we go to grandma's house and say, hey, I'm not eating your cheese turkey casserole thing because it's not healthy for me, you've now violated social norms that people react to very aggressively.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to deal with. So when people do respond that way, I just walk away from it.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to pick the fight. I don't have to fight the fight. Yeah. I can just say, hey, no. Because sometimes no is a full sentence.
Yeah. And the reason for that, though, is because there's some emotionally embedded thing. And so that person feels like they're being rejected personally, on a personal level, whether your grandma's casserole or your friend's, weed habit or whatever. And it's like, oh, by me not drinking at a party, that means I'm judging all of you who are drinking. No, that's not what that means. That just means this is a personal choice for me based on my experience. And if you can handle what you're doing, go for it. But it's hard because we all want to be accepted. We want to be a part of, we want to be included. And so much of our societal stuff focuses around, like you said, alcohol, food, and not just alcohol, but like getting drunk, not just food, but like gorging on nasty, nasty food, right? It's just like this thing that we do. And then you say, well, I'm a vegetarian, or I don't eat fried food. And people are like, oh, well, look at you. Aren't you, and then it turns into this whole thing. And then I feel myself getting defensive. So I've had to, with drinking, it's been a really weird thing, especially when your family drinks and people that you can't like break up with, you just have to have boundaries, like you're saying, and just say, I'm not gonna engage. I don't have to, this doesn't have to be an argument, like to each their own, but
yeah, my friends that when I say, hey, I don't drink, and my friends that say, okay, and that's the end of the conversation. Yeah. Those are my favorites, because I don't need to defend. I don't need to, and I'm too tired to defend. I'm an old man. I gotta just back off of that. My battles.
The hard thing too is like work stuff. I mean, there's a lot of areas. There's a lot of networking. I've been traveling for work, and I'm like, oh God, I forgot how much freaking drinking,
Oh, yeah.
But it's such a superpower because like you're fully in control. You see everything, you remember everything, you get some really great intel because people get really loose lips when they're drinking. And so it's kind of this is good. Okay. So last question, and this goes back to the trainer world, educator. If you could do only one stretch or movement every day, which would it be and why? Because sometimes I think we try to overcomplicate things. It's like, I need these pages of this and I need to be doing that. But what is like a fundamental mobility, prehab, injury prevention? Like what's just like the movement?
I'm going to say this, and I'm going to take a 3-hour lecture, and I'm going to try to get it down into 90 seconds. How's that? I make no guarantee.
Okay.
But I will tell you this. All powerful human movement is rooted in hip extension. Okay? Everything is based in the squat. Learning how to squat properly, learning how to take power off the ground generated from your hips first and drive your body up from there. And I'm going to give you a dirty little secret in fitness. Once you can squat, you can do anything. All powerful human movement is rooted in hip extension. Whether it's a strong punch and a strong football throw or a strong tennis swing are the same thing. And they all start with, it's that hip drive. It all starts with a high quality squat. And I'll back it up a little bit more. Poor choice of words, but and I'll tell you why is glutes are everything. Glutes are everything.
Yeah.
Gluteus maximus is the only maximus in the human body. It's the largest muscle in the human body. It's right in the middle of the body. And if I can get your butt turned on, everything else is easy. And we do that. If we can only do one thing, it's going to be squats. Because from a squat is the foundation of everything that we do. You coming in my gym? Welcome to my gym. How you doing? Let me see some squats. First time you come into my gym, every time.
So do you like, because in CrossFit, and sometimes I don't know, I'm like, is this even the right, but we do a lot of air squats, you're always looking for thrusters and snatches and things that are going to require that hip drive to like pull that power up through the ground and all that kind of fun stuff. And so
literally everything.
But we always do below parallel. And like we talked about this on the plane, but I'm like, is that bad? Is that bad for your knees? Because now I can't do a regular squat. My squats are just automatically below parallel. And I'm like, I'm not sure that's good for my knees.
It's not your knees I'm concerned about. It's your back. So is how deep should a squat be? If you are in a power lifter and you were doing a competitive squat, it has to be your femur has to be parallel to the ground or below parallel. Okay. I don't do that. For me, a squat needs to go as far down as you can and still maintain a neutral spine. What happens is when we get low, tight hamstrings, hip out of balance, weak core, we end up with a butt wink. You know what I'm talking about when we go butt wink?
Yep.
So what happens is once we've lost the hips, we lose the hips because we lose the lumbar spine. Once that lordotic curve goes away, we lose the hips. We should not squat that far. We should squat as far as we can, still maintaining a neutral spine. Now, if that's a really short squat, so be it. We're going to work on mobility and drop that squat deeper over time. But under no circumstances in the gym should we go deep enough that we lose that neutral spine. At that point, we've put the body at risk, and it's not worth it.
See, these are the kind of technical breakdowns, though, that people need to have a coach explain to them and walk them through. And like, I always thought it had to do with ankle mobility. As long as my foot stays on the ground, I am safe no matter how low my squat is. And it sounds like that is not true, because when my
is not necessarily the case.
Yeah. Yikes. Well, I'm scared to come see you, but I'm going to, because I need someone to evaluate the squat and then help me get into this next chapter of fitness, which is not going to be intense CrossFit stuff. It's going to be something different. And I'm not sure what it's going to be what the hybrid.
It shouldn't be that much different. It should be the same movements at moderate intensities.
Yeah. See, you use the word moderate and my brain's like, nah. But
I know that word upsets you. That word upsets people, and I get it, but it is necessary.
But I think too, understanding that it doesn't have to be all out, and some days that's kind of my thing, is like, I don't enjoy those types of workouts the way I used to. They deplete me a lot of times. And so that's a sign from my body that I need to listen to. But unfortunately, I'm still very much kind of black or white, all or nothing. I'm either CrossFitting 6 days a week or I don't do anything, right? It's just, and so I have to take my dogs to the trail to go for hikes. I have to go. So of course I need to go do those things, but I'm not exercising for exercise sake right now, because if it can't be what I want, then I'm just not going to do it. And that's not a great place to be. So, and out where I live, there's just,
I would agree with that last statement.
Yeah. I know. But I need somebody to be kind of like tough love, but also understanding how all that plays together and that kind of thing. So, and I like signing up for adventure races so that I do have something intense to kind of look forward to and to plan for and to train for. That doesn't mean you need to be doing that kind of stuff every day, So, well,
you're already learning.
Yeah, well, I can give good advice. I don't take it. That's that is the problem.
Isn't that true for all of us?
I know we're up on time, and I could talk to you forever. I've learned so much, and I appreciate you being vulnerable and talking about your family and your personal experiences, but also sharing your just expertise and all the education and all the things that you're doing out in the world. And I know this is going to be really helpful to people, and I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'll tell you this. I feel if I can get past my fears, my selfish fears, and expose myself a little bit, and if that helps some people, if that helps you, if that helps some of your listeners to start to make a little bit better decisions and be more open with themselves, then it is absolutely worth the trauma that I go through to expose myself like this.
I feel exactly the same way about my stuff. It's scary to put yourself out there like that, but ultimately it helps people and it helps us. It helps us to be able to just talk about that stuff.
No doubt. It definitely helps us.
I'll be seeing you. I'll make an appointment when I'm in the city, and I'm scared but excited. So.
All right, beautiful. I look forward to seeing you.
Yeah, me too.